November 18th, 1942, Henderson Field, Guadalcanal. The morning humidity clung to everything as 16 Lockheed P-38 Lightnings of the 339 Fighter Squadron touched down on the steel matting at Henderson Field. Hidden in the jungle, Japanese observers watched and radioed their reports back to Rabaul with thinly veiled amusement. These were not the sleek interceptors they expected from America, not the nimble dogfighters that might challenge the Zero supremacy, but massive twin-engine machines with twin booms that seemed to defy the very principles of aerial combat. To eyes trained on the elegant simplicity of the Mitsubishi A6M Zero, everything about them looked wrong. Too heavy, too complex, too American. The Zero embodied refinement through subtraction, every unnecessary gram stripped away, every component reduced, maneuverability perfected through purity of design. The Americans, by contrast, had added engines, added weight, added complexity. At Rabaul, the 11th A Fleet headquarters received the reports with satisfaction. To them, the assessment confirmed what Pearl Harbor had already suggested. Americans relied on material excess because they lacked the warrior spirit that made Japanese pilots invincible. What no one at Rabaul realized was that this arrival marked the beginning of a profound shift in the air war. The assumptions that had carried Japanese naval aviation from triumph to triumph were about to be dismantled. In just 5 months, these ungainly American fighters would execute a mission so audacious it would alter the mathematics of aerial supremacy. The new battlefield would not be the traditional dogfight, but a realm the Japanese had never envisioned, long-range, precision interception. And its outcome would claim their most irreplaceable asset, the very confidence that had carried them this. The dismissive attitude toward the P-38 had begun months earlier, in August 1942, when Japanese intelligence first reported sightings of the strange new fighters in the Aleutian Islands. On August 9th, 2 P-38s of the 343rd Fighter Group intercepted and shot down a pair of Kawanishi H-6K flying boats, the first Japanese aircraft destroyed by lightnings. Yet this distant skirmish in the fog-shrouded Aleutians seemed irrelevant to the wider Pacific struggle. In Tokyo and Rabaul, the news barely stirred interest. When Japanese intelligence circulated its first formal assessment in September 1942, it reflected the same institutional overconfidence that had colored so much of their war planning. The report dismissed the design outright. The twin-engine configuration reflects the American tendency toward mechanical complexity at the expense of combat efficiency. Such aircraft will prove inferior to our fighters in all situations requiring maneuverability. Among the officers reading those words was Commander Minoru Genda, the brilliant tactician who had orchestrated the Pearl Harbor strike. His judgment carried enormous weight, and like many of his peers, he saw in the ungainly lightning nothing that could threaten the supremacy of the Zero. Genda's official assessment, recorded in Navy documents, was blunt. The Americans, having failed to match our Zero with conventional fighters, now resort to unconventional designs. Every additional component is another point of failure. The Zero, he reminded his peers, embodied Japan's warrior philosophy, maximum result from minimum material. The Lightning, by contrast, seemed the very opposite, overbuilt, over-engineered, and destined, in their eyes, for failure. The first encounters appeared to confirm this confidence. When P-38s began operating out of Guadalcanal in November 1942, Japanese pilots noted that the Americans seemed reluctant to engage in turning dogfights. This was interpreted not as tactical choice, but as timidity, yet the first warning sign soon appeared. On November 18, 1942, P-38s of the 339 Fighter Squadron met Japanese fighters while escorting B-17 bombers. The Lightning pilots claimed 3 enemy aircraft destroyed, a modest tally, but achieved without entering the kind of turning duels the Japanese considered the essence of aerial combat. Instead, the Americans used speed and altitude, slashing through formations and climbing away before Zeros could react. Then came December 27, 1942. 12 P-38s of the 39th Fighter Squadron intercepted a Japanese formation near Dobajura, New Guinea. This time the results were undeniable. The engagement was brief but decisive. The P-38s, maintaining altitude advantage and refusing all invitations to turning combat, tore through the Japanese formation, downing multiple aircraft while suffering only light losses. The Japanese Navy's 4th Air Group War Diary, captured after the war, betrayed the first cracks of concern. December 1942. The twin-engine fighters appear over our bases at altitude we struggle to reach. When our fighters climb to engage, they dive through our formations at exceptional speed, fire, and climb away before we can respond effectively. For the Zero pilots, the most unsettling revelation was that their most trusted weapon, maneuverability, had suddenly become irrelevant. Against an enemy that never turned, the Zero supremacy meant little, yet intelligence clung to its preconceptions. The revised assessment of January 1943, distributed to all naval fighter units, still minimized the threat. The American twin-engine fighter is unsuited to sustain combat. Its speed is troublesome, but its maneuverability is poor, and its large size will make it easy prey once drawn into battle. Pilots should remain calm and close rapidly for the kill. It was precisely the kind of advice that would cost Japanese pilots dearly in the months ahead. The Lockheed twin-engine fighter represents American industrial philosophy rather than combat effectiveness. Estimated maximum speed, 350 miles per hour. Service ceiling, 30,000 feet. Range, 500 to 600 miles. Armament, machine guns mounted in the nose. Tactical assessment. This aircraft weight and complexity make it vulnerable to our fighters in close combat. Pilots should force turning engagements, where our superiority is absolute. Such was the official Japanese appraisal of the new American fighter at the start of 1943. The reality was very different. The P-38G Lightnings now arriving in the Pacific could reach 400 miles per hour, climb past 40,000 feet, and, with drop tanks, strike targets more than 1,000 miles away. All their firepower, 4.50 caliber machine guns and a 20mm cannon, was concentrated in the nose, producing devastating accuracy at ranges where wing-mounted guns scattered fire. By January 1943, U.S. pilots had begun shaping tactics to match these strengths. Major John Mitchell of the 339 Fighter Squadron, who would soon lead the mission against Admiral Yamamoto himself, was drilling his men relentlessly. The key lesson was simple: never turn with a Zero. Instead, use altitude, speed, and firepower, hit hard in slashing dives, then climb back beyond reach. The P-38s held their stations high, beyond the easy reach of the Zero straining below. When the Japanese fighters finally clawed their way up to engagement altitude, they arrived already at a disadvantage, low on speed, short on energy, and vulnerable to the Lightning's diving attacks. The result was predictable: swift, slashing passes that left wreckage burning in the sea and bombers untouched on their runs. For American airmen, the battle confirmed that their tactics and aircraft worked. For the Japanese, it should have been a warning that their dominance was slipping. Yet official reports attributed the disaster to numerical inferiority and surprise, not to any superiority in American aircraft or doctrine. The dangerous illusion of Zero supremacy endured, an illusion that would soon be destroyed completely. The intercepted message, April 13, 1943. American radio intercept stations copied a Japanese naval dispatch encrypted in the JN-25D cipher. After hours awake, cryptanalysts at Pearl Harbor decoded a detailed itinerary for Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto's inspection tour. The message specified that on April 18, the Commander-in-Chief would depart Rabaul at 0600 in a medium bomber escorted by 6 fighters, with precise arrival times at each stop. The intercept was forwarded at once to Admiral Chester Nimitz, who ordered an attempt to intercept the flight. Only one Allied fighter could reach the rendezvous area, the Lockheed P-38 Lightning. The interception point lay roughly 400 miles from Guadalcanal, at the extreme edge of the Lightning's range even with auxiliary drop tanks. Mission planning, April 17, 1943. Major John Mitchell of the 339 Fighter Squadron was given the task of planning the strike. The route had to thread a narrow needle, roughly 600 miles routed to avoid Japanese-held islands and coast watch positions, flown at wave-top altitude to minimize detection. 18 P-38s would make the trip, 4 assigned as a killer flight to strike the bomber, 12 as top cover to engage any Zero escorts, and 2 held as spares. Want me to continue with the takeoff, the long rendezvous at low altitude, and the moment the P-38s rose to engage Yamamoto's flight? The pilots chosen for the killer flight were Captain Thomas Lanphier, Jr., Lieutenant Rex Barber, Lieutenant Besby Holmes, and Lieutenant Raymond Hine. For them, Success would hinge on flawless navigation. There was no room for error in fuel use, no chance for a second pass. The interception would have to be executed in minutes. The interception, April 18, 1943. At 0710 hours, 16 P-38 Lightnings roared off Guadalcanal's Fighter II airstrip. 2 turned back with mechanical issues, leaving 14 to press on. For 2 hours and 20 minutes they skimmed the Pacific at barely 50 feet, radio silent, guided only by compass and stopwatch. At 0934, Lieutenant Doug Canning's voice broke the silence. He had sighted the enemy. 2 Mitsubishi G4M Betty bombers flew in trail, 6 Zero escorts weaving above them. Mitchell's dead reckoning had been perfect. They had arrived at the exact time and place. Lanfear and Barber jettisoned their drop tanks and climbed to strike. What followed has been debated ever since. Both men claimed the kill on Admiral Yamamoto's bomber. But post-war analysis of Japanese records and the crash site evidence points to Barber's guns delivering the fatal bursts. The lead bomber's right engine erupted in flames, its wings tearing away as the aircraft carrying Admiral Yamamoto plunged into the jungle canopy of Bougainville. The second bomber, carrying Vice Admiral Matomu Ugaki, was also shot down but crashed into the sea. Ugaki survived. Only 1 P-38 was lost. Lieutenant Raymond Hine, last seen with a Zero on his tail, heading out to sea. He was never found. The shattering impact, April 18, 1943, 1,400 hours, Rabaul. When the surviving Zeros reported the ambush, Japanese naval headquarters initially refused to believe Yamamoto could be dead. A search party dispatched the next day confirmed the unthinkable. His body, thrown clear of the wreck, bore the mark of .50 caliber rounds. He had been killed instantly. For the Imperial Navy, the psychological blow was incalculable. Yamamoto was more than a commander. He embodied Japanese naval prestige. That he could be tracked, ambushed, and killed at a precise time and place chosen by the enemy revealed an American mastery of intelligence and operations the Japanese had never imagined. Captain Watanabe, who led the recovery party, later reported, "The Admiral was found still gripping his ceremonial sword. He maintained dignity even in death." But the precision of the American attack, appearing at exactly the right moment, in exactly the right place, shattered our confidence completely. The intelligence revolution. The success of the Yamamoto interception forced an immediate reassessment to the P-38 and of American capabilities as a whole. A revised intelligence bulletin, issued May 1, 1943, and marked most urgent, all units, revealed the scale of earlier miscalculations. Revised Intelligence, May 1, 1943. Previous assessments of the Lockheed Type L fighter are hereby rescinded based on combat analysis and the events of April 18th. Maximum speed exceeds 400 miles per hour. Service ceiling exceeds 40,000 feet. Combat range exceeds 1,000 miles with auxiliary tanks. Armament, concentrated firepower far beyond earlier estimates. Climb rate, superior to all Japanese fighters above 15,000 feet. Critical warning, this aircraft demonstrates capabilities beyond previous experience. Avoid combat unless a clear tactical advantage exists. The Tactical Revolution. In May 1943, the Imperial Japanese Navy issued new directives that fundamentally altered fighter doctrine in response to the P-38 threat. Years of aggressive tactics, rooted in confidence and spirit, were overturned. Do not attempt to match their climb above 20,000 feet. Do not follow them into high-speed dives. Attack only when they are fixing ground attack or bomber escort missions. Disengage immediately if they retain the altitude advantage. This marked a dramatic break from the traditional philosophy that spiritual willpower and aggressiveness could overcome material inferiority. Against the P-38, doctrine admitted for the first time that restraint was survival. The accumulating losses. Throughout 1943, the Lightning systematically eroded Japanese air power in the Solomons and New Guinea. The toll on experienced aviators was catastrophic. Unlike their American counterparts, often rescued after bailing out, or saved by the P-38's ability to limp home on a single engine, Japanese pilots rarely survived being shot down. By September 1943, most of Japan's pre-war elite aviators were dead. Their replacements, rushed through shortened training programs, lacked both the skill and experience to stand against increasingly seasoned American squadrons. The statistics of survival. By 1943, the gulf in preparation between Japanese and American aviators had become lethal. Average Japanese pilot flight hours before combat, 1943 × 200. Average American P-38 pilot flight hours, 1943 400 plus. Japanese pilot survival rate after 10 missions, × 40%. American P-38 pilot survival rate after 10 missions, × 80%. Numbers told a brutal truth. American pilots were better trained, better equipped, and more likely to live long enough to become aces, while Japan's airmen were consumed in a war of attrition they could not win. The Bomber Offensive, October 1943. A new dimension of the P-38 superiority emerged when it began escorting long-range B-24 Liberators. Missions that once meant near-suicidal losses for unescorted bombers now struck deep into Japanese defenses with fighter protection the Zero simply could not challenge. P-38 combat radius with drop tanks, × 1000 miles. Zero combat radius with drop tank, × 600 miles.